Land shark.
Oh, Walter. Land shark. Honest to God.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Today we are going to be talking about the Single-A Jupiter Hammerheads, who play in Jupiter, Florida. They are a Miami Marlins affiliate in the Florida State League. Later on in this episode, I'll be speaking with Jake Rosner, who is with the Cox Science Center in Florida. And of course, Dan Simon will be here with one of his Studio Simon stumpers. Right now, I am so pleased to welcome to the podcast Brennan Erlinson, who is the Broadcasting and Media Relations Coordinator for Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium, which means Brennan does the broadcasting not only for the Jupiter Hammerheads, who are today's subject du jour, but also the Palm Beach Cardinals, who share a ballpark with the Hammerheads, which is an interesting relationship that those teams have. Brennan is doing double duty. Today we're here to talk about the Hammerheads. Brennan, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Paul. How about yourself?
I am doing very well. I have been meaning to feature this team on the podcast for a long time. First of all, because I love sharks. I love the ocean. I love everything about just marine life. It's always so much fun for me to talk about teams that have identities that are based on on the ocean, on ocean life. You are wearing an awesome hat right now. We commented on this before we started recording here. This cap that you're wearing, you've got a tritone Jupiter Hammerheads. You said it was the batting practice cap. It's got the white front panel, the light blue back panel, and then the red brim, and this awesome hammerhead logo with a hammerhead leaning up against the lighthouse, and then there's a fishhook J in there as well. So much to unpack here. I'm going to start really basic, really ground level. How come a team in Jupiter, Florida is called the Hammerheads?
Well, it dates back to before my time. I've only been here at the organization for a little bit over a year now, but doing my own research and talking to people in this organization who have been here for such a long time, it really just goes back to the community. It really just went back into the schools, and like a lot of minor league baseball teams, it came out of a naming contest. And the one that came up was the Hammerheads. And it's the perfect tie-in to the ocean, like you were talking about earlier. And the hammerhead shark is a very unique shark because of course, it's got that funny looking head that looks like a hammer. And I think it would be still pretty cool if they were called the Sharks or maybe a different species of sharks. I mean, we have the Clearwater Threshers in our league, in the Florida State League, but there's just something unique about the hammerhead. And like yourself, I'm a big fan of the ocean. I'm a big ocean doc guy. I'm all about the ocean and stuff like that. We even have a night here that's all about the ocean. But yeah, it really just came from the community voting. And what came about that was the Hammerheads and our mascot, Hammy, or is by his government name, Hamilton, our head. And it's a bit more unique. And we try to be more in the community in this ballpark. So that's the name that came up. And I think it's one of the more unique names in minor league baseball.
So this was 1998 that the team debuted, and I am somewhat suspicious of name the team contests. Whenever I hear there was a name the team contest, I'm like, come on, the team knew what they were, what they wanted going into it. This one, actually, the more I have read about it and the more I sort of learned about it, it looked like there was a group of school kids who were involved, and they did this like sort of at an elementary school. And I thought that was really fun, that like this fan vote wasn't just like, okay, put it out there, see what names come in, and then we'll just, have people vote online or whatever. If people were voting for names online in 1998, who knows how they were doing that back then. But this one actually seems pretty legit. I think the fact that there were school kids involved sort of speaks to the fact that they chose the Hammerheads, because as you mentioned, the Hammerhead is as a shark. Well, it depends on how you approach it, but maybe a little goofy looking, right? Like it's got that, that strange head and the eyes are way out there, and it, looks like it can't really see where it's going. You mentioned the Threshers. There are other, more ferocious sharks out there. There's great whites and bull sharks and all that. The fact that it's a hammerhead, what do you think is the sort of reasoning or the origin behind that? Like as a shark, what do you think of the hammerhead?
Well, if I can go into the perspective of a kid
Hmm.
back then when they're
Yeah.
trying to name the team, I think that if you're a kid, you probably think of the great white. And maybe if you see an image of a great white shark or a bull shark or a quote normal looking shark, then maybe it's a little bit intimidating. Maybe it's a little bit scary. But even though the hammerhead shark is a predatory fish in the ocean and they're a killing machine in there, you look at them and you go, "Oh, that looks kind of goofy." Like you said, it looks really funny looking. And of course, you might see them in cartoons, and they look even goofier in cartoons. It's tough to get it in the logo because of how unique it is. Like you'd have to look at it from underneath to really appreciate just how unique looking this shark is. But I'm guessing that if you're a kid and you're looking at all the sharks, that's the one that stands out because the comedic effect probably hits the kids more. And I'm guessing that when you're doing name the team contests and you're targeting kids as your voters, they're probably going to go for the sillier name. They're not necessarily going to look at the ones that have the best play on words and the one that comes in the community's history. They don't know any of that. They're just going with what looks cool and what looks funny and maybe what's easier to say too. And I think that's probably why the hammerhead shark prevailed in all of this. And I think it's for the better because I think it's one of the more unique names in baseball, like I said.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a fantastic name. And like I said, I've been trying to feature this team on the podcast for a while, so I'm thrilled to be talking about it. Who's going to win a fight, the Hammerhead or the Thresher?
Oh, I don't know. Here at our ballpark, I can only speak for the teams. The Thresher won last year here at
Oh,
our
okay.
ballpark, but
Uh,
I believe the Hammerheads won at their ballpark out in Clearwater this year. But in the ocean, I bet that they stay away from each other because I think they're like, hey, you're good, I'm good. Let's just try to get the fish together. But I think the Thresher might be slightly bigger, but who knows? There are hammerhead species that get pretty large too. I don't know.
well,
I don't know who would win.
we're going to have Jake from the Cox Science Center on later on in this episode, so we'll get try to get a definitive answer there from someone who works at an aquarium here.
Ask the scientists for sure. Don't take my word for it.
Believe the science, absolutely, 100%. One of the other things that is featured in this logo is the lighthouse. I've been to Florida a couple of times, and and growing up not too far from the Jersey Shore and being on the ocean, lighthouses are a big deal. People love lighthouses. People collect lighthouses. Like I collect minor league baseball stadiums, right? Like it's people love to visit them, and they climb them and they take pictures. And I got to do that in St. Augustine. There's a lighthouse there that I got to climb, and that was pretty cool. But the lighthouse obviously is important enough to the town of Jupiter, Florida, that it was incorporated into this logo. Having been there, as you say, a relatively short time, what is the significance of that lighthouse to the community?
It's everywhere. We're not the only ones that feature it on our photos and our logos. I couldn't give you specifics on who does, but I can tell you just going around Jupiter, I live in Jupiter, that lighthouse has an effect. Sometimes you'll be driving on the street and you'll see neighborhood signs, and in the background, with a little bit less opacity, they have a lighthouse just in the background, and it's all just a hint at the actual Jupiter lighthouse that's near the water. And it's just got that bright red color. It's tall, and Florida's pretty flat. So anything that's tall really stands out. And here at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium, though I'm not the one that came up with the logo and I came way after everything was created, I can tell you just being here and working here that what we try to do is we try to just incorporate as much as possible with where we are and where we're surrounded. The Hammerhead name, we're 10 minutes from the beach and there are sharks out in the water and they're living their life. And the Jupiter Lighthouse, 10 minutes north up the road. It's right there. We do a lot of partnerships with the Lighthouse. They're heavily featured in our spring training and Florida State League game script. They're part of our in-game promotions. They're here on our video boards, and we're very much featured there at their Lighthouse. And it's just all tied in together. And when you think of Jupiter, Florida, I would bet that if somebody doesn't just say blanketly the beach, they probably the first thing that would come to their mind is the Jupiter Lighthouse and Museum. It just stands out. It's the big centerpiece of this community.
Yeah, lighthouses, they're just so, visually distinct and I can see why people would, fall in love with them. We don't have a ton of them here where I live in Colorado. It's not a big lighthouse culture in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Not a lake big enough, I imagine, to need a lighthouse, maybe.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. We basically have traffic lights that serves as our lighthouses. It's like stop here, don't drive into the lake.
Yeah.
So we've covered sort of two of the three elements that are in this logo. The third one is the fish hook as letter J in the word Jupiter. I am a huge fan of image as type in logos, and so the J really lends itself well to that. People aren't fishing for hammerheads though, because I imagine that's not legal. But that fish hook, I imagine, is there because of the fishing culture, the sport fishing culture that would exist in Jupiter. First of all, is that something you participate in as a resident of Jupiter, or is it something that is important to the community?
Well, I need better friends because I have no access to a boat down here. So
Oh,
no, I'm not much of a fisherman. I don't have a fishing rod. I don't. The last time I went fishing, it was in New York off the
okay.
Long Island Sound, and that was a decade ago. Not a big fisherman. If somebody invited me to go out, I think I would say yes. And I would hope that nobody's fishing for hammerhead sharks. That's more of a problem with the commercial fishing industry.
Oh yeah.
But the J hook, yeah, we absolutely love it here. We're trying to incorporate it a whole lot more with our uniforms. My former boss, Ryer Garden Swords, he was a very creative mind. He had a hand in making these hats, the one that I'm wearing right now, the multicolor red, white, and blue Hammerheads batting practice hats. He has a good design for things, and we had a uniform this year that they were donated to charity, and it was the Marlins kind of teal green jersey, and it has Jupiter written across the chest, and the J, of course, was the J fishing hook, and it's just such a cool thing to be able to implement. And it's nice that we have a J in our name that
Yeah.
we're able to use the fishing hook for. Otherwise, we would have had to get creative, maybe with a T or an I or something, and try to blend it in there a little bit more. But it is unique to be able to have a J name and have a J fishing hook. And we do, I mean, this is one of the fishing capitals of America, maybe even the world. People come down here to fish all year round. They got boats, and a lot of people have done really well for themselves, and they go all year round. And fishing's definitely a huge part in the community. People come to the baseball games after and before fishing. And people dress like they just came from fishing when they come to the ballpark. So, absolutely, it's definitely tied into this logo. Everything we try to tie in as many things as we can into our artwork and into our message and into our partnerships here at the stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say too that I am with you on fishing. That's never really been like a recreational thing for me, except for I love being on a boat and I love being, somewhere out in the sunshine where there's going to be a cooler full of beer. And so long as fishing has those two things, I'd be perfectly fine with it. I probably just wouldn't participate in the actual, rod and reel part of it.
I think that you ever watch the show Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee
I
with
have
Jerry
seen that show.
Seinfeld?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's an episode with Bill Burr on it, and he's talking about, he says that his brother gave him advice saying that you don't want to be the guy who owns the boat. You want to
Right.
be the guy who has the friend that owns the boat. And because I can imagine that owning the boat is such a hassle, it's expensive, and you got to upkeep it and everything.
Yep.
And there's so much work to being able to plan a fishing trip. I certainly don't like it enough that I'm the one that's going to have to be like, hey guys, we're getting up at this time, bring your this, bring your that. And then I'm in charge of making sure that everybody's safe on the boat. I'd rather just be the one that's like, hey, what do you need? I'll help out.
Right.
And then we have a good time. And then I get off the boat and I'm done. Like
Somebody
that's the
else's
last
problem.
of my responsibilities. And
Somebody else is scraping barnacles and hosing it off and all that stuff.
yeah, and I'm not much of a drinker. I'm not really big on alcohol, but I'll bring some sodas and some waters. I'll still try to have as good a time as I can. And I think the big thing that I would really enjoy is just being out on the water. I like looking at the water. I think it's so meditative. I think it's so serene to be out there. And sometimes it's just a real peaceful time. as far as getting my hands dirty and actually putting the bait on the hook and grabbing it off the hook, I think I would be a little bit more timid. Maybe I man up at some point and actually get in there and start doing it. But I'm not much of a fisherman myself, and
No.
nobody's invited me out here so far.
Not yet, although I'm imagining, anyone listening in the Jupiter area is going to reach out to the team and say, "Hey, can Brendan come hang out with us? We're going out on the boat and staring at the ocean." That sounds like a great afternoon to me. I wanted to get into the unique nature of the ballpark where you work. You're at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium, and whenever I remember when Ben Hill was doing his trying to get to every affiliated minor league baseball stadium. And back then there were 160 teams, and he said, "Yeah, I've been to all 159. Now there are 120 teams, and so anyone trying to collect all of them would go to 119." And the reason for that difference of one is that the Hammerheads and the Palm Beach Cardinals share a ballpark. The Palm Beach Cardinals, I have to say, they commit to me with one of the cardinal sins, as it were, which is that they're named for their parent club. So that's how come we're talking about the Hammerheads and not the Cardinals right now. But you broadcast for both teams. You work for both teams. That is, that's a pretty interesting situation for you. You're doing twice the work, I assume, for double the pay. And what for the listener at home, Brendan is doing this with his head. How do you approach, as a broadcaster for these teams, how do you approach that sort of double duty nature of your job?
I think coming into this, I thought it was definitely an interesting opportunity, and I'm really fortunate that I got the chance last year to come aboard, see the operation, and actually do the two teams, broadcasting more games and for more teams than I'd ever done in my entire young career so far. And I think the cool part about it is that I get to do that many more games because at this level, it's really difficult to go out and travel with the teams. And my commute stays the same every day. It's just the teams that change from week to week. And I still get to have the best seat in the ballpark talking baseball. And I think that the challenges that came with this is one, it does require a little bit more upkeep on the prep work that goes into each broadcast because it could get a little bit more challenging to stay on top of it because of all the moves that two teams make and two games are played. And that's just an important extra step that's on me. That's something I have to keep in mind. That's no issue for me. I like that part of it. I think the part that is maybe the biggest bummer, and bummer is a strong word because I really like it here and I love my opportunity to be here.
I did ask you to watch your language, Brennan. That's we do have a safe rating on this one, so please don't use words like bummer.
Oh, all right. Well, then I would say that the the one the biggest challenge that comes with broadcasting for two teams is that I don't build as intimate a connection with one team as if I were a broadcaster with one team. Because even if I was broadcasting for one team, maybe I'm on the bus trips with them, I'm in the hotel, there's a bit more of a relaxed environment. If you're just going out to dinner and you get to have those conversations on the bus, I don't get that because I don't travel with the team. And each team, it's coming in week to week. The series change. So really the tough part is that it's on me to be able to build as strong a relationship as much as I can while the team is still at the ballpark and they're playing here. And that will just be the biggest challenge going forward. But as far as challenges go, that's not really that big a deal. I love where I am. I love what I do. I love talking baseball. And it is cool to see just the minute details of how each parent organization runs their club. The Cardinals do things a little bit differently than the Marlins. And there are those slight changes, how their team philosophy, their organization philosophy, and sometimes you get to see different perspectives of, oh, the Cardinals, they play this way and they do these things, and the Hammerheads, they do something that's totally different. Last year in 2024, well, the Cardinals won the Florida State League, so they won their third title in franchise history. The Hammerheads unfortunately missed the playoffs last year, but both teams had top prospects. The Cardinals played a little bit more of a traditional brand of baseball, singles and moving runners over and, getting those RBI chances. And they pitched really well. They were the best pitch team in the league last year. The Hammerheads, they were more crafty. They were more bunting guys over. They ran a lot for the longest time. They were the best base stealers in the league. So they were showing off a little bit more of that speed and athleticism on the field. It really is a unique perspective to be able to do two teams, but ultimately it's baseball and it's awesome to be able to sit back in this booth that I'm in right now and getting to look out, see what I see and talk about what I see and hopefully describe it enough to have the fans tune into what I hope to be is a great product.
When I listen to a hometown broadcast, I always sort of expect the hometown broadcaster to have a little bit of bias, right? Like I'm a Phillies fan. I want John Kruk to be rooting for the Phillies as he's watching the game. Both the Hammerheads and the Cardinals are Florida State League teams, and so surely they must play each other every once in a while. Is that a challenge for you, or do you just go middle of the road?
The way that I try to approach it, and sometimes I'm not successful, I'll admit it, but looking to constantly improve. If the Cardinals are here and they're taking on one of the other 8 teams, then we go hard on Cardinals. If it's just the Hammerheads here and the other 8 teams, then it's a Hammerheads broadcast. But when they're here, we like to call it the Duel of the Dean or the Fins and the Feathers. That's what we like to call it. We
Nice.
have 2 nicknames for the series, and they play each other quite a bit. Uh, I try to approach it like Joe Davis would in a playoff scenario. Everybody knows that Joe Davis is the Dodgers broadcaster, but you wouldn't be able to tell if you're watching a Fox broadcast of a nationally televised game because he likes to get excited for both teams. And I think that we just have to treat it like I don't work for either team and I'm just coming in here and I'm just seeing what I see. If it's a nice play, I got to call it like a nice play. If it's a tough error, got to call it like a tough error. And if it's a long ball, get excited for it, no, regardless of the team.
So I know you're trying to go middle of the road, but secretly you're rooting for the Hammerheads because they've got this awesome, fun logo.
Well, because they are the topic of conversation in this podcast, sure, absolutely. And I am the primary Jupiter media contact. That's
Okay.
my big responsibility. I have a coworker named Sophia. Her title is in-game entertainment and media relations coordinator. So we both share the media relations duties, but I took over the duties for my former boss and he had the Jupiter responsibilities, and Sophia's going into year 2 having Palm Beach responsibilities. So naturally, I'll have a little bit more of a rapport with the Hammerhead squad because that's a little bit tied in more to my responsibilities. But I'm still in both clubhouses. I'm still interviewing both teams, talking to both managers, and ultimately, we have the best chance of making the playoffs in the Florida State League because we're a 4-team division with 2 teams at this stadium. So
Oh yeah.
50% chance that one of our teams in the playoffs and 25% chance that we're both in it, which is not unheard of. And either way, I just want to be calling playoff baseball and get another championship out of this. We're getting a ring for the Cardinals in the next month or so as part of our ring ceremony. Let's switch it up and maybe go Hammerheads this time around. They won it in 23. Maybe they can win it again in 25.
Awesome. One last question for you, Brendan, before I let you get out of here. The elephant in the room here, the elephant-sized planet in the room here, is that Jupiter is not just the name of a town in Florida. It is, of course, the name of the 5th planet from the sun, the gas giant with its great red spot and all of its moons out there. Jupiter, seems like Jupiter, the planet, seems like it would be sort of ripe for like an alternate identity, the moons or something like that, or the great red spots. Is that something that ever comes up? I can't imagine that this classic brand would change, but as an alternate identity, is there ever any chatter about playing off that space theme?
I believe it's been done in years past. I know that we have played into the gas giant theme. I want to say either 21 or 22. As far as this 2025 season, it's possible, but I'm not sure that it will come to fruition. It is something that is talked about. I know that we've had meetings where we try to see what Palm Beach could do as well as an alternate identity. Jupiter, I would say it has a little bit of an easier chance because, of course, it incorporates the whole planet and solar system and moons and all that stuff. And it's got already one of the more unique names. Cardinals, it's a little bit more of a theme because the Cardinals, of course, are named after the parent club, and maybe they want to start tying in some things there where they want to have something a little bit more unique to the area. But I'm sure it's something that's going to be talked about in months to come, maybe years to come, as Jupiter and Palm Beach try to have that alternate identity that a lot of minor league teams are starting to incorporate and really be successful at. I've seen some teams throughout minor league baseball really just go for it and come up with these unique, crazy, it might seem on the surface, I'll say stupid, but then it comes on and the graphic design looks good and they really play into it and fans love it. So I would definitely say, in my own personal opinion, I'm not speaking for the stadium here. I definitely think that that would be something that we should absolutely try to do. Try to come up with something unique, whether it be that we play into the whole planet thing, or we find something close to the area and we go with maybe a different kind of animal or a location or something just totally wacky. Because in minor league baseball, people keep pushing the envelope of what's wacky. It's wacky, corny, and silly all play well in minor league baseball.
Well, and to that point, this brand came out in 1998. There was, a minor update with just some sort of coloring and that sort of thing, but for the most part, this brand has remained largely unchanged since 1998, at a time when, you really had just seen like the Carolina Mudcats and the Portland Sea Dogs, and, you were just about to see the Lansing Lugnuts and the Montgomery Biscuits. And so, it was pushing the envelope at the time, and now is more sort of a classic. So, the Hammerheads are no slouch when it comes to pushing the envelope for sure. So, Brennan, I always do this. I kept you longer than I meant to, but I really appreciate it, and it's a fun brand to talk about. Where can people find you and the work that you do online, social media, that sort of thing? And where can people find the team?
Well, first, definitely follow Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium, where we have both teams at RDC Stadium on social media platforms, Instagram, X, what have you, and Facebook. It's just Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. Palm Beach Cardinals, just put the word go before that. So at go PB Cardinals, and then Jupiter, it's at go Hammerheads on X and Instagram. That's where we get all of our content. And right now it's all hands on deck for spring training. That's sort of our Super Bowl here at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. But for myself, I'm not as busy on social media, but you can follow me at Erlinson PXP on X and Instagram. That's generally where I am most featured. Not on TikTok. Definitely a little bit of an old head there. But for those that want to tune into a game, we'd love to have you tune in. Starting on April 4th. The Cardinals open the season here on April 4th, and then the Hammerheads will open the year on April 8th. Come all season long, Tuesday through Sunday, 6 days a week. We're America's busiest ballpark and should be a lot of fun. And come to spring training, too, if you can. Take a spring break trip to Jupiter.
Yeah, if you're listening to this right around when it drops, get to spring training and check out America's busiest ballpark. I like that very much.
America's busiest ballpark, absolutely. 30 games in 30 days from February 22nd to March 23rd. All the East Coast teams are playing here multiple times. It's going to be a great time.
Brendan, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Absolutely, Paul. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to have from the Cox Science Center and Aquarium, Jake Rosner, who is the Vice President for Aquarium Operations, here to talk about some hammerhead sharks, here to talk about Jupiter and the marine life, the ocean environment there, the ocean ecology. Jake, hello and welcome. How you doing?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great today.
It is -1 here in Fort Collins, Colorado right now when we're having this conversation. I imagine it's a little warmer in Jupiter, Florida.
It's a little nicer here. We're looking at about 80 to 85 today, so nice and sunny.
Obviously, the reason I asked you to come on the podcast was this team in Jupiter, Florida is called the Hammerheads. That is, local to the area. There are hammerhead sharks there. Before we get into the hammerhead sharks specifically, What is, can you tell me, sort of your mission, your as an organization, the Cox Science Center and Aquarium, what is it that you were trying to bring to the community there?
Yeah. So our mission is to open every mind to science. And what that means, it's a pretty broad term. It means opening people's minds, their awareness to science, to STEM education, and the ocean as a whole. Because we're not just an aquarium, we're a full science center. And so we want to teach people about engineering and math just as much as we want to teach people about the ocean and our natural resources.
Well, I spent much of my childhood thinking that I was going to be a marine biologist. And then my mom told me one day, she said, Paul, if you want to be a marine biologist, you're going to need better grades in biology. And so, that wasn't quite there for me. But ocean life has always had sort of a magic about it to me. I've always loved it. In particular, so far as really wacky, wild marine life goes, hammerhead sharks, we're sort of used to seeing them, but they're an incredible species, right? They're an incredible sort of result of evolution. Obviously the eyes out on the way out on the side of their heads here in these formations. How did they evolve to have this crazy head formation?
So hammerhead sharks are extremely specialized, and that hammer shape to their head, we call that a cephalofoil. Basically means a head foil. And while it does separate the eyes and create space there, the real importance there is all the sensory organs just above the mouth. We call those ampullae of Lorenzini, and that allows them to detect electrical fields in prey items that are just under their jaws there. So that's really important for the hammerhead because one of their favorite food items is a stingray. And stingrays like to hide in the sand, so they can't always see them. So it's a much more effective hunting strategy if you can sense the heartbeat of that ray, even if you can't see them. Now, the cephalofoil serves another advantage as well, and that's when it comes to catching those rays. They can actually use that to kind of swat the ray and stun them so that they can get a bite.
All right. You know what? I've seen hammerheads my whole life. Not never in person, except for at aquariums, but I never understood that was the reason for the sort of separation of the eyes and the cephalofoil. How common are they to that area of Florida? You're on the Atlantic coast. How common are hammerheads to that area?
You do see them, and as someone who is out diving or snorkeling almost every weekend, I encounter them occasionally, maybe once or twice a year. Florida is a great place to find them, though, especially down here in South Florida. Miami is a key location for the great hammerheads and their offspring. You see a lot of very young great hammerheads during certain times of the year, but their populations are nowhere near what they used to be, and so they are still a very rare animal to see in the wild. If you can compare to their numbers to what they were in even the 50s and 60s, you're looking at 90 to 95% population loss. So there used to be a lot more. Now they're a little less common.
What's that the result of? Is that overfishing? Is that climate change, pollution? Is it all of the above?
Primarily overfishing.
Okay.
And so the conservation of sharks and rays, animals that live very long lives compared to other fish or invertebrates, and reproduce much later in life and give birth to much fewer offspring, the fishing pressure affects them the most, just like a grouper. So the fishing, the overfishing, the fin industry really damage these populations over the last 50 years. Now, habitat loss, the loss of their food sources is also a primary factor. But when you think of climate change, that really affects your reefs, your smaller organisms, and of course that magnifies up. But the fishing pressure is by far the worst for the sharks.
When I think about this logo, this team was named by a Name the Team contest that largely involved children, which I thought was really fun. And they settled on hammerheads, just because I think there's probably sort of a certain charm that this sort of interesting looking animal has to kids. Do you find that at the aquarium that there's a particular draw to hammerheads just because they are so different looking, especially compared to other sharks?
Absolutely. And I think most kids are familiar with hammerheads too. So there's a little bit of a familiarity there, whether it's from watching TV, Discovery Channel, or reading a kid's book that has a hammerhead shark in there. Because they're such a unique animal, they get highlighted a lot in media, especially children.
We were talking about, how common they are to the area. Are there shark species that are more common to that area?
Yeah, so up in Jupiter, you're most likely to see nurse sharks. As you get further offshore, you might see sandbar sharks or silky sharks. Then you start getting into those other really rare species like tiger sharks. Every once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, we get a great white sighting, but those animals are not typically in Florida.
Is there enough sort of education around sharks now in Florida that, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the whole notion of like, if you see a shark, you are definitely going to die, right? Like you will not survive, and being in the water with a shark. Is there enough education around that now that there's sort of less of a fear of sharks, or do you think that's just always going to be there because people watch too many movies?
I think it's still there. The fear is still present. There is a great deal of effort to remove the demonization of these sharks, though. And most shark species are not that big. They can't really hurt you. And even a large shark like a hammerhead is not going to intentionally attack a human being. So that's part of my job is to display these animals, to build that connection and use that connection with kids, with adults, and try to show them that these are just large fish that want to eat their prey items, which are smaller fish, and want to survive to an age where they can reproduce. Sometimes human activities get in the way there, but a shark, especially a hammerhead, typically tries to run away from a person rather than engage them.
What are the most popular exhibits at the aquarium? What are people really drawn to when they come there? And do you have like a signature exhibit that the Cox Science Center and Aquarium is known for?
So right now, our largest exhibit is our deep sea exhibit, and we have some other really cool shark species in there. One of my favorites is an ornate wobbegong, which is a crazy name for a fish that comes from Australia. But it is related to fish that you see around here. Those nurse sharks that I mentioned are a very close relative of the wobbegong. And so they have similar feeding strategies, similar ecology, and they also get fairly large. We are in the process of a large expansion, though. So set to open in 2027. We're going to increase the volume of water in our aquarium by over 10 times. So
Wow.
we're going to be able to exhibit much larger species of shark and stingrays.
So on the other side of Florida, you have the Clearwater Threshers, an affiliate of my Philadelphia Phillies. If the Threshers were to take on the Hammerheads, which happens because they're in the same league, which one is the more menacing mascot, do you think? Which one it would be the more imposing to take on the field?
Definitely the hammerhead. If you were talking about a small school of fish where that thresher can get in and whip its tail around, the fish would be afraid of the thresher. But the hammerhead, it's winning the head-to-head against the thresher shark.
Nice. I kind of feel like we need to have a team called the Ornate Wobegongs now. I think that would be maybe in the Australian Baseball League they could either be a city out there that would would take that on. Are you a baseball fan? Have you been to a Hammerheads game?
I have not been to a Hammerheads game. I would not say I'm a huge baseball fan, but growing up in Pittsburgh, I went to Pirates games all the
Right.
time. I've been to Mud Hens games
All right.
quite often. And then going to school at Ohio State, we had the Columbus Clippers. So went to many of those games as well. So I do go to games. I wouldn't say I'm a follower of all the happenings in the league.
Well, that's all right. You've been to some some iconic ballparks and teams there. I mean, the new ballpark in Pittsburgh. It's still new to me because I haven't been to the new one yet. I went to the old Three Rivers Stadium when I was young, and then Columbus Clippers. They have a great ballpark too, with the big brick building out in left field and the bar on the top of it. That's a really fun ballpark as well. I've never been to a Mud Hens game, but it's on the list. I got to get there because that's just an iconic minor league team. This is I'm gonna sort of ask you a conceptual question here. What are the physical qualities that a hammerhead has that might make it a good baseball mascot? What are the physical qualities of a hammerhead that you can say, okay, this would make it a great imposing player on the baseball field?
Speed and acceleration,
Mm.
number one and two. They are the player that would be flying around the bases, stealing bases because they're faster than anything else out there. That would be number one. Number two, flexibility and agility. Because these sharks don't have bones in their body, they have cartilage. They can turn and basically touch their head to their tail in a split second and turn direction and go the other way. So agility would be the next item there because they are just so maneuverable and they can outrun fish and then they can outmaneuver them to catch them.
All right, Jake, I just because I don't know what I don't know here. Is there anything else I haven't asked you about that people should know? And maybe like what are people when you have a visitor to the aquarium, what are people surprised by? What are people surprised to learn about hammerheads?
So the first thing is we don't just have one species of hammerhead here.
Oh,
We have two species and a close relative called the bonnethead. So scalloped hammerheads, you can find them in Florida. They're a little bit smaller, get to maybe 8, 9 feet long. And then your great hammerheads, the ones that people recognize with the big dorsal fin, those can get well over 14 feet long. So they're really large animals. When people come to the aquarium, I think they're most surprised by all of these small life forms that are required for a functional ocean environment. And our aquariums are little microcosms of those ocean environments. And so we try to represent them accurately. And all the little crabs, the invertebrates, the coral, and the sponges, all of that contributes to a healthy ecosystem. And whether it's in an aquarium or in the ocean, removing one or two of those pieces can affect the entire system.
such an important message and such important work that you all are doing. I mean, it's a fragile, delicate ecosystem, and so I appreciate all of the educational efforts that you all are putting in there at the Cox Science Center and Aquarium. Where can people find you online, social media, all that sort of thing to come learn more?
So we're on all social media platforms. You can find us at our website at coxsciencecenter.org, and we have all of our information there. You can find us on social media with updates on all the events that we have and all the activities going on, as well as news on our expansion progress.
The 2027 Cox Science Center and Aquarium sounds like it's going to be pretty amazing. Times 10 with your total volume on water there. That's pretty incredible. So I hope to get to a Hammerheads game. And when you go to a Hammerheads game, make sure to check out the aquarium. Jake, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is time once again for Studio Simon Stumpers, my favorite segment, your favorite segment of the Baseball by Design podcast, in which Dan Simon, designer extraordinaire, brings a trivia question every single week that addresses, in some way, sometimes directly, sometimes tangentially, the subject of this week's episode or each week's episode. Dan, good morning. Hello, how are you?
I am fantastic, Paul. Thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. We're staying in the state of Florida here, thinking sunny thoughts. Last week, we talked about my spring training trip. This week, we are doing an episode on the Jupiter Hammerheads. Hammerheads are a fun animal, and so this was a fun episode for me. I like marine life in general. I like sharks. And, in my head, I am still among the palm trees and the beaches and the sunshine of Florida after a great spring training trip.
Yeah, that's a good place to be in your mind, especially when you live in a place like you do, Colorado, where your winter can stick around a bit longer than it does in other parts of the country. So it's good to have warm thoughts in your head during that time. But go
March
ahead.
can be snowy here. When I first moved to Colorado, we had a 31-inch snowstorm on St. Patrick's Day.
Um, you mentioned in your preamble there that you like sharks.
I do like
So,
sharks.
and this is a minor league branding themed podcast. So can you think of other teams with shark names in baseball?
Well, as you know, I just spent 5 days, 4 days in Clearwater, where, of course, the Clearwater Threshers exist. And that was one of the fun things about spring training in Florida is that it takes place at the minor league stadiums. You know, spring training in Arizona, those ballparks are not used as consistently throughout the season. So not only were we at Phillies spring training, but we were also surrounded by this fun minor league brand, which was, in the team store and on the signage and that sort of thing. So the Threshers come right to mind when I think of Sharks and minor league baseball. Nothing else is really jumping to mind, though.
Yeah, it's actually surprising. I guess I'm trying to think of where other shark teams, I guess any coast. So
Mm.
there's opportunity for it, but it's interesting that there's not a lot.
You did an identity for the Wilmington Sharks in Wilmington,
Right.
North Carolina, and you sent me
And
a hat for that team.
yes, so that's a summer collegiate team.
Yeah.
There's another summer collegiate team, um, the Marther? There's a
Marthers.
New Yorker in me. The Martha's Vineyard Sharks.
Okay.
Um, that that's currently a summer collegiate team. Now you've got an alternate identity in affiliated minor league baseball. The Durham Bulls
Oh, yeah.
will sometimes play as the Bull Sharks.
Yep.
And then the only other thing that two other things came to mind for me. One was there was a Hawaii Winter Baseball League from 1993 to 1997. It then got resurrected in 2006 through 2008. One of the teams in that league was the Honolulu Sharks. So there was that team. But I mentioned there I could think of two others. So the
Okay.
Honolulu Sharks was one of them, and the other is the subject of today's Studio Simon Stumper.
All right.
So there was a team with a shark identity in the inaugural season of the Independent Northeast League. That was in later the Can-Am League,
Okay.
but the inaugural season was 1995. And this team only played in the Northeast League for that one season.
Mm.
And our studio Simon Stumper today asks, what kind of shark was this shark? Were they A, pygmy sharks,
Mm.
B, loan sharks,
Mm.
C, land sharks?
Mm. Loan sharks is funny. I don't know if the spelling of loan sharks in your head is Lone or Loan, but that is funny. I'm going to say that loan sharks is not the answer because a loan shark Loan, you wouldn't want your team to be called that, even if you were sponsored by, some lending organization.
Chico's
Lon.
bail bonds?
Chico's bail bonds. We saw a guy wearing a Chico's bail bonds jersey at the game in Lakeland a couple of weeks ago at spring training. And that was very funny. It said, with the little slogan at the bottom, "Let freedom ring." That is a terrific for those who don't know, a great Bad News Bears reference. So I'm gonna discount loan sharks. Pygmy sharks, I can see. I think that would be kind of a fun brand for a team. Land sharks is picking at the back of my brain as the correct answer, though. I feel like I've possibly even heard of that or seen that. Possible that it was land sharks. pygmy sharks would also be fun though. So I'm gonna go, Dan, I'm gonna go with land sharks rather than pygmy sharks, and I have discounted loan sharks, which often means that's the correct answer.
The land sharks is your answer. Are
Land
you
sharks is my answer.
final answer?
It
Well,
is.
your final answer is correct.
Oh, thank goodness.
Okay, they were the Mohawk Valley land sharks. That is in New York State.
Okay.
It's actually right not far from Cooperstown. And I was in Cooperstown in the summer of 1995. And we went to Little Falls, New York, and saw a Mohawk Valley Land Sharks game.
Wow.
So again, did not have to research this one. This is something that I knew from personal experience. Now, the one season only Land Sharks, they disbanded not because of poor play, because they had the second best record in the league, but rather poor attendance. And I can attest to the fact that they had poor attendance because their facility was basically like a decent high school field. It just wooden bleachers, no bells, no whistles whatsoever. Beautiful, beautiful setting. It was like in a mountainous forest. It was just absolutely beautiful beyond the outfield wall, but not a great place for professional baseball. Now, coincidentally, when they folded, they were replaced by another shark-themed team, the Rhode Island Tiger Sharks.
Oh.
So that was another shark team in professional baseball. But pygmy sharks, there is a species of sharks known as pygmy sharks. They are the second smallest species of shark. They grow only to 9 or 10 inches, second only to the smallest species of shark, the dwarf lantern shark. 6 to 8 inches is all they grow to. Now, one of the things I was wondering is, so this is 1995. Are you familiar with the land shark sketches on Saturday Night Live?
Yes.
Is that a thing that, you're not, I don't think you're old enough to have watched Saturday Night Live at the time, but has that become part of the pop culture zeitgeist? I don't know if maybe 20 and 30-year-olds necessarily know about it, but do most people know about that?
Yeah, I think if you were to knock on somebody's door and say land shark, they would get it. So yes,
Okay.
for someone of
Okay.
my generation, I would say yes, even though it wasn't really part of SNL when I was watching SNL in real time, it became part of the cultural lexicon.
Well, and it goes all the way back to 1975, the first year of Saturday Night Live. As I think hopefully a lot of listeners know, there was just a big 50th anniversary celebration. And so it goes back to their initial season, November 8th, 1975 show hosted by Candice Bergen, when Chevy Chase donned the land shark costume and gobbled up his first unsuspecting citizen.
And I don't even know if I got the quote right? Like maybe he was trying to hide the fact that he was a land shark, and he was saying encyclopedia salesman or something else, like he was trying to disguise the fact that he was a land shark, and then finally gets her to open the door and he's a land shark and he eats her up.
Eventually, it gets around to him saying, "No, I'm not a land shark. I'm a dolphin." And the person inside says, "Oh, dolphins are cute," and opens the door and then gets eaten by the land shark. So, and you know what? My wife and I were talking about this last night. Were those things funny? I am old enough that I've been watching Saturday Night Live since the beginning, and back then it seemed funny, but looking back on it, it just doesn't seem funny.
I think it was absurd, right? Like, and that's sort of what made it funny. The absurdity of it was funny. And, we've seen so much in the last 50 years. Comedy has obviously changed in the last 50 years, but like I think, yeah, back then you could just be absurd, and the absurdity alone was what made it funny. And I think it's still funny in a sort of pure and innocent kind of way. I say yes, funny.
Okay. Well, maybe just it wouldn't be funny today,
Hmm.
you know?
It's a little bit like the classic baseball logos that wouldn't make it out of the first focus group today, right? Like if you look at a team called the Detroit Tigers or the New York Yankees, and you look at the names that seem like they were sort of pulled out of a hat, or the very simple branding and logos that go with them that now are classic and untouchable. A new team today, they're going to demand more than just interlocking letters and a random animal that doesn't live in a place. So it's a question of hindsight in a lot of ways.
Which is 2020. So,
Indeed.
okay.
Dan, this has been fun. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy, busy schedule to come up with these Studio Simon Stumpers and to bring them to us every single week on Baseball by Design. Your work can be found on Instagram at studio_Simon. Dan, thank you so much. This has been fun.
It sure has. I'm looking forward to next week. See you then.
See you then.